Hello Weathering fans, and welcome to our 18th race for Terra Community Spotlight. In today's video you will have the chance to see 4 different projects, namely a Sicaran Tank, a Leviathan Dreadnought, a Questoris Knight, and last but not least, a Grosser Hund Maschinen Krieger scale model. Would you like to know more? Tomasz joined our Discord in January, and this is his first entry for our Community Spotlight. Ever since he joined, a bunch of us have been trying to infect him with the Horus Heresy bug, as my friend Jan put it, and you could say this awesome Sicaran is the result of that. One of the first things that struck me the moment that I saw the finished product is the degree of attention to detail, which is evident here. It makes sense, therefore, that in his report Tomasz emphasized the idea of planning. He explained, and I quote, "Planning and sticking to your idea is important. It is okay to change it during painting, but it should not be a hot-headed decision with so many overlapping, chipping layers, masks, etc." Tomasz adds, "Before starting, I took a spare Rhino door and tested 3 versions of chipping I liked most and settled on one." I think you guys will agree with me that this really comes across clearly with this build. Personally, if I have to choose my favorite aspect, it would be the subtle use of texture, which Tomasz has made. He took inspiration from my use of ammo anti-slip paste, and frankly, I think improved upon it. A close second would be the choice of pigments for this. Tomasz explains that mixing dry and liquid pigments to achieve a dusty and worn look that made the model pop more and placed it in an environment allowed me to create a story for my Legion. Well, Tomasz, I think this is one of the best tank entries in the history of the Spotlight, and there have been quite a few. So keep up the good work, and we want to see more Horus Heresy models from you in the future, even if you continue to play with 40k rules. Stanislav joined our Discord back in November, and like Tomasz, this is also his first contribution to our Community Spotlight. As you can see from his work, however, Stanislav is far from new to painting miniatures. When I asked him what the main challenge had been, Stanislav replied, and I quote, "Learning to chip with a brush, which is something I started playing around on my previous project, but I took it a step further this time." He also comments on how time management can be an issue, as this was ultimately a gaming piece. That is definitely a well-known challenge for many of us. For Stanislav, the main lesson learned with this project was the importance of sealing inks before continuing on with the project. He explains that he had to strip paint from this model once before due to that, so he concludes, "I'll have to learn some self-control and not go overboard." My favorite aspect of this build is the worn-out grimy metals, which I think provide a nice contrast to the colorful yellows on display. One recommendation from me would be to try different chipping methods, particularly to compare the return on investment in terms of the time required for each of those. Stanislav, this is a great example of Horus Heresy painting, and I hope that he will provide us with many more in coming months. Like Stanislav, Nick joined us in November 2022. He shared some of his great work with us since, which encompasses projects as varied as Napoleonic models, 2 Sons of Horus, to more recently a Night House. Nick explains that, and I quote, "Freehand work on the flames was a challenge, maintaining a similar size and shape." He adds that it was his first time doing lighting effects with the airbrush and using fluorescent paint. Well, Nick, as it happens, I've just begun to experiment with fluorescent effects myself, and I must say, this looks great. When I asked him what were the main lessons that he learned with this project, Nick mentioned getting the airbrush to perform consistently, and learning how to drain or clear the water in the line. This is a very common issue for many of us, depending on weather conditions. He also mentioned mechanical chipping, and managing the staining of the red primer onto the yellow finish. Well, Nick, you probably know that I'm partial to this chipping method, and I think you did a really good job in this respect. Personally, my favorite aspect of this build is the mottled look on the yellow panels, which I much prefer to the pristine yellow finishes that you sometimes see out there. War machines surely aren't meant to be pristine, are they? Nick, I enjoyed looking at your pictures, and I hope that you share a lot more of your work with us, from any and all genres. Unlike the others, Stefan is far from a new participant in our community spotlight. In fact, this is his 7th entry to date from a variety of genres and styles. Not in vain, his last entry was a Sicaran T-55 tank. With this Grosser Hund, Stefan returns to science fiction, but does so with a 1/20th scale Maschinen Krieger model rather than a wargaming mini. Maschinen Krieger, or MAC for short, originate from a somewhat obscure Japanese sci-fi franchise, which has a very peculiar aesthetic and quite a cult following among modelers all over the world. But back to Stefan's amazing model. When I asked him what he had enjoyed the most, Stefan replied, and I quote, "Texturing the model. Every detail has that cast steel texture. I applied it with Mr. Surfacer." Well, Stefan, I like a lot of things about your model, but it is precisely this that I love the most about it. If you like the looks of this but are concerned about assembly, Stefan adds, "Did I also mention that this was a really great kit to build? Just came together great, excellent instructions, and part quality is wonderful." Now, Stefan, this could be the kick in the behind that I need to put together and paint my own Maschinen Krieger, as I have had 2 in my stash for several years now. I know, shameful, right? In terms of lessons learned, Stefan emphasized how some simple enamel rust colors really work well without going into a thorough OPR process. Now, in case you're not familiar with the acronym, guys, OPR is short for Oil Paint Rendering, a concept coined by famous skill modeler Mike Rinaldi. Anyways, Stefan explains that his choice not to use OPR for this one particular build resulted, and I quote, "in a good enough model and plenty of time for a base." Well, Stefan, given how beautiful this diorama base looks, I think your decision was the right one. So guys, I hope that you enjoyed tonight's spotlight as much as I have. Our next one will take place around September. Once again, I would like to thank everyone who is supporting me as a YouTube member. Your generosity helps me keep the lights on, and your positive energy in the Discord makes everyone else feel right at home. Thank you all, and remember, keep it up and weather it out.